Alright, this is for my friend Chelsea, who doesn't have enough time of her own to read, so I'm reading for her. Which I don't know if that makes any sense, because listening to somebody read a book might be a lot slower than reading it yourself. But it'll be entertaining anyway. So, she wants me to read her Cannibal Killers, because who doesn't like cannibals? I guess I should read the introduction first. Alright, so, introduction. When Man Eats Man. In the summer of 1986, an international team of scientists excavating a Stone Age dwelling inside the crap. I'm gonna have to make pronunciations. This is terrible. Fontbreguoya cave in the hills of Provence in southeastern France made an astonishing discovery. In what they had at first imagined to be just a shallow refuse pit used by the cave dwellers some 6,000 years ago, the anthropologists found a number of bones, which they now believe to be the earliest and most convincing evidence of the practice of cannibalism by humans. As the team carefully sifted through the refuse in the pit, they uncovered the butchered remains of 6 people, 3 adults, 2 children, and one of indeterminate age, which had lain undisturbed there for 6 millennia. The excavators also found several other deposits of human bones in the cave, but there was clear evidence that all of these had been disturbed by animals at some point in time. Immediately following the discovery in the pit, the bones of the 6 people were analyzed under an electron microscope. This revealed that all had been stripped of their flesh with stone axes very shortly after death had occurred. The arm and leg bones had also been cracked in order to gain access to the nutritious marrow inside. And there were signs, too, that they had probably been cooked over a fire before being eaten. The leader of the research team, Dr. Palavilla from the University of Colorado, announced the discovery in the journal Science on 18 July 1986. He stated quite unequivocally, "I am convinced that this is the first true instance of cannibalism that has been proved." What Dr. Villa and his team believed to be so important about this find was the fact that the bones had not been moved or gnawed by animals during the thousands of years they had lain in the cave. For often in the past, when ancient bones giving the impression of being butchered had been turned up by scientists, further investigation had proved that they had actually been scavenged by animals or else used in burial rites, which involved the cutting up of the remains. Drink time. Popular mythology has, of course, for many years, propounded a world of bestial Neanderthals and flesh-eating jungle tribes. Some anthropologists, however, have disputed the fact that cannibalism has ever been systematically practiced by human beings. Although, they admit, there are many reports about primitive groups who apparently ate one another, eyewitness accounts of such acts taking place are very rare. Consequently, the case for and against the existence of the practice has raged amongst the academics for years. There are, for instance, those scientists who accept that the ancient Aztecs practiced cannibalism because it gave them important nutritional advantages, while on the other hand, some authorities have equally strongly disputed accounts that the tribesmen in New Guinea regarded eating human flesh as ethically and socially acceptable. Whatever these debaters may say, however, the historian books undoubtedly contain a large number of accounts of people eating one another, stories which date from earliest times to the present day and range in their locations across much of the world. In literature, too, the evidence of fascination with the subject is readily found. Shakespeare, for one, wrote in Othello, "It was my hint to speak. Such was the process, and of the cannibals that each other eat." Likewise, the 18th century man of letters Jonathan Swift could not resist satirizing the subject in an attack on the politicians and landlords who oppressed and starved the people. Sorry, the poor. Kind of synonymous. Demonstrating as he did so that the topic was as familiar in his day as it had already been for many centuries. I have been assured, he wrote in 1728, by a very knowing American of my acquaintance in London, that a young healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled, and I make no doubt that it will equally well serve in a fricassee or a ragout. Just recently, we have had that intrepid explorer, Colonel John Blashford Snell. Wow, nice name. Blashford Snell. Blah, blah, blah. Expounding his belief that Colonel H.P. Fawcett, who disappeared in the Amazon jungle in 1925, was eaten by cannibals. And if support was needed for the view that the practice continues in that part of South America, this emerged only a couple of years ago, pardon me, in a form of a documentary movie shown in Italy and Spain, Cannibal Holocaust, which featured the gruesome tale of 4 journalists captured and eaten by the fearsome Shatamari cannibals living in a remote area of the Orinoco Basin. This book, however, is not intended either as an argument for or against the reality of cannibalism, or even a history of the subject, but rather as a casebook of some of the most notorious flesh eaters in what we like to think of as the civilized parts of the world. Instead of accounts from the jungles of Africa or the remote islands of the Pacific, herein will be found stories of people from Britain and Europe, America and China, who have all been irresistibly drawn to drink the blood and taste the flesh of their fellow human beings. Most of these people, it transpires, have been driven by an impulse that is difficult to explain in rational terms. Although man is, by instinct, tradition, and even uh, although man is by instinct, tradition, and even choice a carnivore. Indeed, the fact is inescapable that there are very few types of creatures that exist on this planet that man has not eaten at one time or another. The taboo which for years has surrounded the subject of man eating man, how now thankfully been lifted in our more enlightened times, and only by studying the facts can a more complete and balanced picture of the phenomenon of cannibalism be made. In the pages which follow are some histories which I submit should be taken as part of the evidence. And that's that for the first one, because my tongue does not want to continue with this. So I shall bookmark it, and maybe tomorrow I'll read a little bit more.